Ever noticed how your background images look perfect in one orientation, but once you switch between portrait and landscape, things get a little bit wonky? Background images might become stretched, cropped, or misaligned. This is a common issue that can negatively affect the user experience on mobile devices and tablets. In today's video, we'll show you how to properly handle background image scaling across different screen orientations. When users rotate their devices, like switching between portrait mode where height is greater than the width and landscape mode where the width is greater than the height, the background image often doesn't adjust in a way that looks good. This can lead to a stretched, distorted, or cropped background image. Take a look at this simple example. We have a full screen container with background image, and we are using the CSS property background size 100% 100% to make sure the image covers the entire container with no respect for aspect ratio. While this looks good in one orientation, when the screen switches, the image can get misaligned or cropped. This is especially noticeable on mobile and tablet devices where the screen size and aspect ratio change dramatically. So how can we fix this? The solution is actually quite simple: media queries. With media queries, we can apply different styles for different screen orientations, portrait and landscape. This ensures that the background image behaves correctly no matter how the user holds their device. So now I'm going to type some code and then I'll explain. I'll fast forward from here. Okay, let's break down what's happening in this solution. We have defined the default state using background size 100% 100%, which works well in many cases, but not in this one. However, when the device switches to portrait mode, we adjust the background to background size contain. This ensures that the entire background image is visible without being cropped, even if it doesn't fill the entire container. We also center the image using background position center. In fact, with these two solutions, having background size over here as 100% 100% doesn't make sense because the user can only be within a portrait mode or the landscape mode. So I'm going to change this to cover as the default, and we don't need to do this over here in the landscape mode. In case you missed our earlier videos, media queries are a CSS technique used to apply different styles based on the characteristics of the device or viewport, such as screen size, orientation, or resolution. We have already used screen size and resolution in earlier videos, but we are introducing orientation now, where you can get information about which orientation the user device is in at the particular moment. So for landscape mode, we have switched back to background size cover or the default to make sure the image continues to cover the full container even if some parts are clipped. This gives us full coverage, which works best for wider screens. We are also using background position center so that we can focus on a particular area of our image in that orientation. So let's see the results. So this is the portrait mode where the entire picture is visible due to contain, and if I switch to landscape mode where the width increases the height, you can see the center part of the image, and then back to portrait mode. So why does this approach work? Well, by using media queries that target screen orientation, we can ensure that background image behaves correctly for each mode. In portrait mode, the background size contains make sure the entire image fits within the container, preventing any clipping. However, this may leave empty spaces on the sides if the aspect ratio doesn't match, which you can see right now. Right? In landscape mode, background size cover ensures the image fills the entire container. Some parts of the image may be clipped, which you are seeing. The top and bottom portion of the image are missing, but the overall effect is full coverage background, which typically looks great on wider screens. And with background position center that we are using, we are focusing on the center part of the image, which makes the overall effect looks great. But that is subjective based on what kind of background image you're using. Now that we have got the scaling issue sorted, let's focus on ensuring your background image behaves consistently across all devices and screen sizes. This is especially important for mobile first and responsive designs where screens are constantly changing orientation. Some free tips for you: use responsive units for flexibility. Make sure your layout is responsive by using percentage based bits VW, width, VH, viewport height, percentages, or other fluid units instead of fixed pixel values. Aspect ratio control, consider using aspect ratio CSS property where appropriate. It can help maintain a consistent aspect ratio for your background images even when the screen size changes. And lastly, use multiple background images. In some cases, you might want to load different images for portrait and landscape modes. This can be done using media queries to swap out the background image depending on the orientation. With these tips, you can better ensure that your background images display beautifully no matter the orientation. Let's break it down further. So in some cases, it makes sense to use completely different images for portrait and landscape orientations to better fit each mode. While this has been covered in detail in a previous video, I'm going to show you how to handle this. So if we go here, I have a better, more landscape-friendly version of this image available with me. So I'm going to use that in the media query where we detect that the user device is oriented towards landscape mode. So I'm going to say background image, and in URL I'm going to specify image and tower landscape. All right, we have set up different background images for portrait and landscape orientation here, and don't forget you can specify a totally different version for portrait mode as well. I'm not doing that because this is a portrait friendly version already. So let's see what happens when we switch to landscape mode. See, in landscape mode, we switch to a wider image that looks better when the screen is horizontal. This gives you a full flexibility over how your images are presented across various screen orientations. Let me show you the effect in a full screen browser as well. So this is the landscape mode. And now we can also introduce background size contain since this looks pretty landscape friendly. So if I refresh, in our small viewer, there was no space around the image, but in the full wide screen in maximized mode, you can see there's plenty of white space around the image. So let's figure out how to handle that. Okay, so this happens around 500 pixel markers. So let's handle that as well. So I'm going to move back to my Visual Studio Code and I'm going to introduce yet another media query. In fact, I'm going to just copy paste it over here. Okay, you go to the side. All right. So I'm going to add another clause to this media query. Let the other one sit on top and introduce a new one. And I'm going to say min width being 550 pixel and container and orientation is landscape. So this is going to override this orientation landscape if this clause is also true. Minimum width is 550 pixels. And in here, we are going to remain the background image remain the same, but we are going to make one small change, which is background size cover. All right, so now let's see what happens. So if I increase this, our second media query kicks in and we see space coming around. But if we go a bit further, in fact, let me make it 500 pixels, right? And if we go beyond 500 pixels, then it's going to use background size cover, which is going to extend the image, maintaining the aspect ratio, but trying to stretch the image to cover the container all around. I would say the overall result is pretty decent now. Right, so handling background image scaling across different screen orientations is an essential part of responsive web design. And by using media queries and adjusting the background size for portrait and landscape modes, we can make sure our background images look great no matter how the user holds their device. And that wraps up today's video on handling background image scaling across screen orientations. If you found this guide useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more web design tips, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Have any questions or suggestions for future topics? Drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to check out our HTML background images playlist where we have tons of tips and tricks just like this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.